And we're live.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Red, White, and Blues. So if you've been with us for a couple of episodes, welcome back. If you're new to Red, White, and Blues, here's the deal. So Dustin and I talk about cities, modernization, tech policy, smart cities, everything around the integration of government and technology. We do this in our day jobs and we take it pretty seriously. So we thought, you know what, let's take 15 minutes to just be a bit more casual and talk about some of the common topics, some of the current events, things that we really think are at the top of what everybody should be talking about. And let's just give it a try and gab. It's only for 15 minutes. So hope you're starting your day with us here. And yeah, let's get into it. So one of the things that came out this week in Forbes was an article about the city of Houston. And of course, you know, no one's excited about this global pandemic, but what I think is really great is that the city of Houston, and of course, Mayor Turner is the spokesperson for the city, is the one presenting all of this, but they really look at this as an opportunity to say, how can we build the digital infrastructure of our city and use that digital infrastructure to deliver more solutions and just help people who are in really trying times. And that at its core is what we like to see smart technology and gov tech do, is, you know, basically like positively influence a city. It's not just about the technology is the enabler. So Dustin, what are some of the top things that came out of this for you?
Yeah, it was great to read this story. So, thanks for putting it on my radar too, because I think I saw your LinkedIn share originally caught my attention here. But, this was a great one because we hear smart cities all the time. We've talked about smart cities at length. We wrote a playbook on smart cities together, right? And part of the challenge is that, people don't really have a common definition of smart, and they also just throw a lot of technology and money at trying to be smart without actually accomplishing anything. And so this was a great look at a city that is large, but that is actually kind of approaching this correctly, in my opinion. I think, one, they leveraged what they already had. So at the height of COVID, they're a big city. They've got more resources in a lot of cities. They could have gone out and deployed all kinds of crazy technology and try to, put in place, systems to keep up with contact tracing and other things. But they looked at what they had and they said, how do we leverage this? How do we apply new use cases? So that was really, interesting and I think encouraging and a good practice that other cities should take note of. I think two, they leverage their ecosystem. And when you think about, ecosystem, we've talked about this too, right? It's not just, they leverage their departments or their department heads or, even the NGOs that are around them, but they actually went to residents and they went to, academic institutions, and they figured out how to bring all these people together and to have kind of a unified approach. And then three, I think they really focused on the things that were mission critical. I mean, there's a lot of fluffy things you can do with innovation, a lot of, quick wins, put up a dashboard, say kumbaya and you're done, right? But they actually really focused on solving some tough problems that had
tough ones.
Yeah. So I think, it's encouraging to see that because they did it rapidly, they did it with what they have, and they leveraged, a diverse set of stakeholders for it. And it's like, they just kind of followed the plays of what we've been talking about. And I think they saw some good results out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love, in the playbook that we created, we start, kind of step 0 is define your values as a city. And, that basically translates to what are you implementing smart technology for, and not just, kind of one-off projects, but what's the long-term vision? And I love that in the article, they talk about, they've been dedicated to this and slowly building over the past decade. These are not quick fixes. So I love that they're wrapping everything around resilience, and, they don't obviously list out their values per se, but you can see it infused in some of their activities. So if I had to guess, I would think that all of their values are around diversity. Obviously, Houston is the most diverse city in the country. And depending on how you define it, that can be from 2 to 5 million people, depending on, you're crunching the numbers. And they're also a very inclusive city. So, when you're dealing with such a diverse population, it's not like you can just have one application and then think it's going to work for all people. So, and then they've wrapped it all around resilience, obviously. And Houston's right in the middle of the hurricane path. And as a native Houstonian, I didn't grow up there, but I was born there, so I can claim native Houstonian. Being a resilient city and right in the path of natural disaster kind of builds some muscle around making sure that you're prepared for whatever kind of disaster is coming. And the pandemic certainly hit that. So I was very happy to see them talking about, of course, some of the applications, but then some of the things that they've been investing in for a long time, like AI, cloud, edge, sensors, data. These are just some of the things that are listed. And I know they're on Mayor Turner's staff, Jesse Bounds, who's really heading up their smart cities initiatives. I mean, just what a champion. And we talk all the time about usually the cities who are leading in the smart city space in the US. It's because there's a handful of really dedicated champions in that city government who they get it, and they're willing, to your point, to reach out across City Hall and work with industry, work with corporates, work with nonprofits, work with all of the different stakeholders in town, including the startup community. So happy to see that.
Yeah, and I think the key word that you said was resilience too, right? Because that was kind of the frame that this article was written by. And I think, that's something that every city's trying to obtain right now, but it's not a product. It's not something you can just go, oh, I'm just going to go to vendor XYZ and buy a resilience as a service and B. It's really a philosophy.
No, that's a good idea.
I know. Yeah, I wish it was that easy. It's like cybersecurity, right? You can't just buy a box and check it off and say, okay, I'm done. I've got an approach. You have to really think about it holistically. You have to think about how it's infused in kind of the DNA of your city and your agencies. And, in the case of Houston, that's a very diverse set of different stakeholders that are there. So I think, this does really exemplify what it means to be resilient. It kind of gives us a model for that, but it also shows the importance of executive leadership as well. And so, in addition to Jesse, I mean, having the mayoral support, having, a mayor that's really backing it and not doing, even one of the mayor's quotes is, not doing technology for technology's sake, but really looking at ways to apply technology to solve these problems. And I think, unfortunately, not everyone is approaching it that way, but I think that's the role of, you may be in IT, you may be in another department, but that's kind of your role, is to help these elected bodies, to help these policymakers, to help these executive sponsors understand what technology can do, what it can't do, and how to best apply it. And I think, that's where this was encouraging. It was great to see all of those, dots connected there. And hopefully other cities will take lessons from this and how they can do it. And I think, the bigger opportunity here now is when you look at COVID response, everybody, like, it's a super fragmented landscape, right? Like, everyone is doing something different. And yes, COVID has impacted all these jurisdictions a little bit differently. Some are dealing with, more dire financial situations than other, depending on their revenue makeup. But the reality is we're still all reinventing the wheel together. I mean, look at contact tracing as an example, right? There's been several frameworks that have been put out, an Apple-Google partnership. And I think you've now got 2 states that are leveraging that. Everyone else is doing something else. And it's just super, not just uncoordinated, but there's so much room for connecting the dots here and really looking at how do we build a resilient set of government agencies, not just one city, and how do we start to connect and learn from each other and kind of what we're doing, and not, just going at it alone and looking at it. And I kind of look back to when it first happened, right? I think that was the most coordinated government has been since probably World War II, right? And you had, all the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the cities were all, diffusing what the federal government was saying. They were putting it out. It was super coordinated. Then it became political. And then the division started to happen. And now you've got cities and you've got states and everyone kind of interpreting information, trying to put their own, level of emphasis on certain tidbits. And I think that creates a challenge. People expect this coordinated approach. And when it comes to smart cities, I mean, that's really what it is, right? It's about connecting those dots.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's such an opportunity to like lean into fear when you don't know what's coming next. And it's one of the reasons why I just pounced on this article, because what I'm hoping is that there are going to be champions within other cities that can absolutely say, look, it's possible. Here's how they're doing it in Houston. And, you know, in the US, we just don't have that many examples yet of coordinated efforts where, you know, city government is reaching out to the hospital system. They're looking at really difficult things like monitoring particulates in the water to be able to predict COVID outbreaks. I mean, that is very impressive and not uncontroversial. So I was just happy to see, you know, the city of Houston really taking that leadership position, because I'm sure there's going to be some pushback. I'm sure there's going to be, you know, with heightened attention, you always have your own degree of criticism that will follow. But what I hope will happen is that there's a groundswell of other maybe CTOs or mayor staff members, or even from the private sector, who say, look, cities, here's how it can work. And that can be a blueprint going forward.
Yeah, and I know when we were initially looking at smart cities, right, there's not a holistic smart city that we can really point to that thinks about it across, you know, all facets of things, right? Everything's like focused on transportation or smart lighting or smart connectivity and infrastructure. And I think, you know, this is an example of pulling together a variety of different stakeholders, a variety of different departments, a variety of different use cases, leveraging a common foundation of infrastructure and talent and skills and community resources, and really going after it. So it's kind of like, this was a warm-up act. And I think to your point around what's next, you know, we don't know, that wave one never ended, so we can't really prepare for wave two. So I think it's, you know, figuring out how do we do this over again, not just in crisis mode, but in a continuous basis. So I think Houston's demonstrated it's possible and you can do it, but now how do we do that at scale? How do we do that across multiple agencies? And that's the bigger, you know, kind of question right now for me.
Yeah, when I've been looking, they mentioned in the article, the ION Smart and Resilient Accelerator. I've had the chance to talk with Christine Galeb over there. And I mean, just what an effective leader she is. She just gets it. And, you know, she readily admits she doesn't have a technology background. So I think honoring folks who can bring together all of those different people, from, you know, tech experts down to community builders, and provide them a place to land. And I've been really encouraged by kind of the foundation, to your point, and how the ION Accelerator is playing a part in that, because ultimately they're serving as the startup launch pad. So it's like people who really want to innovate, who have a cool idea, they just don't know how to approach city government. It's those third-party kind of intermediaries that I think are going to become hopefully more common, certainly increasingly important in the smart city scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, kind of where we go from here, right? Larger cities need to look at connecting the dots with other cities, including those that are smaller, that are around them, that don't have the infrastructure, the means of doing this. And, you know, for those of you watching that are in a rural town and you don't have, you know, the revenue necessary to deploy sensors everywhere, that's okay. You want to leverage what you have. Being smart doesn't mean you have, you know, high-tech Wi-Fi enabled smart trash cans. It just means that you're applying new processes, new technologies, new approaches and ways that drive value for your agency. And I think, you know, the net of it is that, and those of you that read our playbook will know this, right? That there's not a silver bullet on how to be smart. Now, there is common approaches. There's things that you can extract from what other cities have done before you. But, you know, every city's a little different. Your makeup's different, your culture's different, the stakeholders in your ecosystem are different. And so you want to identify that and you want to leverage that, like what Houston did. They just did it at a much larger scale. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from that kind of going forward and doing this at all sizes of communities across the country.
Yeah. That's kind of the beauty of the American approach, is that it is so democratized and it's such a different approach. To your point, every single city is different, but it also makes it pretty difficult, because when you're looking for a way to kind of stamp things out, you just have to understand it's not going to work that way. And everybody has to kind of customize their own approach from a shared set of beliefs and perhaps ways to do it. So Yeah, well, we're at 14 minutes and we always promise to keep it at 15. So anything else on your mind, Dustin, that you just want to like jam on for a minute before we wrap it up?
I think the only thing that we've been thinking about is kind of what this next normal is, right? Like, or new normal, whatever you want to call it, and kind of what should people be preparing for? What is this new reality? And and I think kind of the way we've been looking at is there's a lot of uncertainty, but what is certain? I think, what is certain that cities need to prepare for now? Your workforce is going to be split. You're going to have people working from home, people that are working, in a physical office. So you're going to need a new set of skills to manage them. I think you're going to have to be adaptable, right? Like, we don't know when this wave will end and when the next one will begin. So you have to anticipate and plan for all variations of that. So I think that's important to know kind of as you're factoring this into your smart cities plan. And then I think it's just back to the basics, right? Like, use this time as an opportunity to focus on the plumbing of your agency and what you should be doing, from a policy standpoint to enable virtual remote work, to foster relationships with the community. So, leverage this as an opportunity, not just to get really good Zoom meetings, but to really reinvent the internal workings of your agency to be adaptable and conducive to anything that comes. So those are some of the things we've been thinking of as we kind of prepare for this next normal.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And honoring that, in smart cities, bringing up Jesse Bounds, it's the people who make that happen. And so if you're in this situation where you're kind of finding yourself resistant to change or really afraid of what's next, or, not really sure about what's coming down the path, then like recognize that and honor that. And to your point, focus on the big picture. Like, what are we here to do? Serve our communities. And as long as that is our guiding star, then I think we can get better. And it's going to be messy in terms of the new normal. I think change is just going to be a part of our daily dialogue, but I think we can do it if we all work together. So if you need some help, you want to connect, please reach out. We will host these once a week. We invite your questions, we invite your participation, your perspectives. This is what we're here to do. So let us hear from you, and thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
See you next time. Thanks.